Welcome to the Ruby on Rails tutorial, Learn Web Development with Rails. I'm Michael Hartle, author of the Ruby on Rails tutorial, and your host for these screencasts. The purpose of this tutorial is to teach you how to develop custom web applications. The resulting skill set will put you in a great position to get a job as a web developer, start a career as a freelancer, or found a company of your own. If you already know how to develop web applications, this tutorial will quickly get you up to speed with Ruby on Rails. The focus throughout this tutorial is on the general principles of web development. And so while of necessity we'll have to pick a particular framework, the skills you'll be learning are generally transferable to other frameworks as well. That being said, the particular framework we'll be using is especially well suited to our task, and is generally a great choice for making web applications, namely Ruby on Rails, often called Rails for short. Rails is used by a huge variety of different companies, including Airbnb, GitHub, Hulu, and Shopify, a hugely successful online store builder. In fact, the founding CEO of Shopify, Tobi Lütke, was one of the earliest members of the Rails core development team, and attributes a substantial amount of Shopify's success to the decision to use Rails. Rails is also especially good for this kind of tutorial because it's what's called a full-stack framework, covering everything from the back-end that talks to the database and persists user data and so on, all the way to the front end that renders HTML or hypertext markup language back to the user's browser. As a result of this integrated design, by learning Rails, you'll really understand how web apps work. Throughout this tutorial, we'll be developing 3 different web applications of increasing sophistication. Starting in this chapter with a simple Hello app. Then in chapter 2, we'll develop a toy app, which is a simplified but real database-backed web application. Then in chapters 3 through 14, we'll develop the main sample application for the Ruby on Rails tutorial, called Sample App. Now, the name Sample App is intentionally generic, because, as always, we'll be focusing on general principles. The sample application shows how to make the kinds of things you'll need for pretty much any kind of web application, such as a way for users to sign up or to log in. In addition to these generic elements, we'll also learn how to make a particular kind of web application, specifically a simplified version of Twitter, a web application that, coincidentally, was also originally built in Rails. There are no formal prerequisites for this tutorial, which covers all the things you need to know for Ruby on Rails web development, including the underlying Ruby programming language, the Unix command line, hypertext markup language or HTML, cascading style sheets or CSS, a small amount of JavaScript, and even a little SQL or structured query language. That is a lot of material though, so if you're completely new to software development, I recommend learning the prerequisites to this tutorial by starting with the tutorials at Learn Enough, especially Learn Enough command line to be dangerous and Learn Enough Ruby to be dangerous. You can find out more about those tutorials at learnenough.com. On the other hand, a surprising number of complete beginners have gotten through this tutorial, so don't let me stop you if you're excited to build web apps. Let's get started.